Lolly ho, fellow warriors of darkness. Haru here with episode 2 of Fresh Prog. Today's episode is about setting up an efficient UI. Having a good UI setup can lessen the difficulty of a fight significantly, as the quicker you're able to gather necessary information, the quicker you'll be able to make critical decisions. First and foremost, let me begin by saying that your interface is largely a personal thing. Finding what works for you specifically is incredibly important, so I won't be giving you a specific layout that you should be using, but more so general things you should be keeping in mind when creating your very own UI. This is my UI setup taken directly from my stream, twitch.tv/yoshinoharu by the way. As you can see, no matter what information I need to find, I can typically view it while still keeping the actual fight at least partially in view. In general, the goal for your UI should be to minimize the distance that your eyes need to travel to gain information. Your hotbars, buffs, debuffs, personal cast bar, enemy target bar, enemy cast bar, party list, and for some players, your radar, are generally things that you want to be able to glance at quickly without taking your eyes too far from what's happening. For this reason, a lot of players tend to keep things clustered as close to the center of the screen as possible without actually obstructing their view. Depending on what you feel like you want to prioritize keeping track of, there are a variety of things you can do to your UI in order to make the information more accessible. It's always worth it to click this gear here on any of your UI elements when working on this to see what options are available to you. You can do things like separate your buffs and debuffs, separate elements of the enemy target bar, or scale specific elements to be larger or smaller to gain better visibility. It's also worth it to go into the UI section of your character configuration menu to see what other options are available to you. There are a ton of options in these menus to explore, so here are some things that I recommend all players at least consider. Aim to reduce clutter by hiding bars and UI elements not used in combat. Things like your mounts, gear sets, or emotes are things that you may want to keep on hotbars for ease of access, but are hardly necessary in a fight. Creating simple macros like these can give you the option to quickly hide these when you're in an instance. Alternatively, you can create a combat and non-combat UI. You have 5 different UI layouts available to you and can even copy layouts from one slot to another if you simply want to make a modified version of your normal layout. You can use a macro like this in order to switch between the two. These one-line commands will be in the description. Turn off the options to show hotkey numbers and unused hotkeys. These can be incredibly distracting, especially on jobs like warrior or machinist, where you may find yourself with many blank hotbar spaces. On the note of distracting UI elements, if you find the large animated gauges of some jobs to be distracting, you can set them to display a simplified version with this option here. This will transform the job gauges into simple bars and dots rather than flashy, stylized gauges. This can be done on a job-by-job basis, so even if you change into a simplified mode for one job, you can keep the stylized gauges on others where you might find them more useful. Set your target bar to show only debuffs that you apply. Setting this option will not prevent you from seeing allied debuffs on your focus target bar, so you can use both of these bars in tandem to keep track of things like your dots more easily without having to give up on seeing when allied debuffs are applied. Enlarge important UI elements. Things like the enemy cast bar, buffs and debuffs, party list, and your own cast bar are handy to keep enlarged and more centralized in your UI. A lot of raiding in Final Fantasy XIV is focused on keeping track of and playing into allied buffs, paying attention to debuffs applied to you, and using enemy cast bars as cues as when to perform specific actions. Enlarging your own cast bar is particular to casters, who will find it much easier to identify when they can move during their cast, aka slide cast. Consider creating a hotbar without any keybinds and placing it near the center of your screen to keep track of important cooldowns or procs. Many jobs in Final Fantasy XIV have rotations that require you to use abilities as soon as they come off cooldown. Having a separate hotbar in your immediate field of view can be useful for keeping track of these. If you have trouble navigating a battlefield, consider keeping your compass near your hotbars or closer to the center of your screen. There are many players that do this to have a constant reminder of where north is to keep themselves oriented during an encounter. I see this trend most commonly among tank mains. Change the color of enemy hitboxes. This is specifically if you're having trouble identifying where the enemy hitbox is. You can change the color of an enemy's hitbox by changing the color of their display name in this menu. This is particularly important when you're playing on melee and can use the hitbox to identify where to stand to hit positionals, something I'll be going over in detail in a future video. These suggestions are decent things to keep in mind for all playstyles, but as I originally said, your UI is a very personal thing. What works for me may not work for you, so mess around in your menus and find something that does. But wait, I can hear some people saying, how do I play on controller and there are some other things I need to consider too? I'll be releasing a supplemental video soon where I discuss setting up UIs for controller and clicking playstyles. As I play exclusively with the hotkey playstyle, I'll be reaching out to my static mates and interviewing them on things that they find important in their UI. It'll be kind of an episode 2.5, so look forward to that. Setting up your UI to be easy to navigate is something I recommend every player take some time out of their day to do, especially if you want to take raiding seriously. Something as simple and tiny as moving where the enemy cast bar is displayed can have a tremendous effect on how consistent your gameplay is, so make sure to set one up that works for you. I'd love to see what your UIs end up looking like after you tinker with them. Tag me on Twitter with a screenshot of your UI with the hashtag #MyHUDIsBestHUD if you'd like to share. If I get enough of these, I'll make a video picking out which ones I think are the best. If you have any additional tips or questions, make sure to leave them in the comments below. And if you found this useful or ended up sharing this video with a newer friend, remember to leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.